Hey, what's up guys? This is Breath, and today I'm going to be time traveling. Not the time travel, but today I'm going to be using a camera that I used back in 2012. This is the camera that I officially, bought to start my photography. So I needed a camera for all my photos. So I picked up a DSLR, even though it was the Canon T3, and today I have the Canon T7. I think that they're very, very similar because still at the time being, if you are trying to get into photography, you are trying to learn those, manual DSLR skills, I think this is the camera to go under $500. You can go for better options like Sony a6400, a6500, 66, 67, all those things. And then if you can afford it, you can even go up to the Sony Alpha series, such as, Sony a7 1, 2, 3 Mark III is probably one of my favorite cameras. It's a pro camera, really easy to use. That's what I'm recording this video on. So you can see the different things and different ways to record videos or take photography, for example. So this camera, just to be honest with you guys, I bought it for a friend off of B&H. I'm going to be giving it to them. So before they got it, I wanted to make a little review video of, just going back in time and showing how good this camera really was and how bad it was. Of course, now for a beginner, this camera is really good, and I think it's a really, really good camera. It has like major upgrades since the T3. I believe T3 was around 12 megapixels, while this is 24 megapixels standard, and it has a couple of things that I like versus I dislike. So a professional photographer's review on the T7, a starter beginner's camera. So let's check it out. So here I have it with me. So first of all, I want to mention that I got a couple things in the package for around $450. First of all, it being a Paint Shop. I've never used this editor or Paint Shop Pro Ultimate. I've never used this editing software. I am kind of curious about how this will be, but if you guys have used this before, comment down and let me know how good is this Paint Shop Pro compared to Lightroom or other softwares. So it comes with this. I believe the retail value should be around $50. It shouldn't be more than that. And then it also comes with a 32 gigabyte SD card. So here's the camera. So let's just check it out. So it does have 24.1 megapixels. It's a CMOS sensor, so pretty nifty things. I think this T7 probably compares to the 70D that I bought back in 2015 or so. That was my upgrade. So my lineup went from Canon T3 to a Canon 70D, and then I got a Sony a7R2 for photography, and then it was Sony a7 Mark III. So that's like my 4 lineup of cameras that I used throughout my photography journey. I used a bunch of different lenses, but mainly that was like the bodies that I used, not counting GoPros or DJI Osmo or stuff like that. So here we have a couple things here. First of all, as I mentioned, is the 24.1 megapixels inside of this body, and then we have ISO of 6400, which is not that high coming off of a Sony camera, but I do believe that if you know your skills, you don't need to bump up that ISO anyways, and you don't need to get those grainy footage unless you're a person that can't use external lighting. I don't think that you'll ever need this. And this camera, basically, because it's a beginner level camera, it does come in with a built-in flash, so you won't be needing to bump up the ISO too much. Next up, we do have full HD video. Unfortunately, this camera does not have 4K, which is a really bummer because everything is kind of going up to 4K. But if you are mainly using this for photography, I think this is good enough. And then it can also shoot up to 3 frames per second. As a pro photographer, I'm used to having 10 to 15, but for a beginner, I do believe this is good enough. And unless you're shooting sports, I don't think that that's even necessary. It does have Wi-Fi and NFC connections, so you can connect it to your computer or your phone or the application to use it, I believe. And then, so built in, just want to go quickly over it. It comes with the digital camera, of course, the body, and then it has a zoom lens, which is 18 to 55 millimeters. It's a pretty base kit lens. I do not like that lens, but it's a good lens if you want to start off. However, the aperture changes every single time you zoom in or zoom out because it is not fixed aperture. I think that's a backlash of this lens, but so before I put this thing together, I want to mention that the best part about getting a DSLR camera is that your body is basically, it's like the brain, or it's your body basically. Think of like a human body, but you can also get enhancements on top of that. Like you can change the lenses. In other point and shoot cameras or your iPhone or, a GoPro, you can't actually do that. You can change the filters on top, sure, but you can never actually change the lens itself to get different kind of shots, different type of depth of fields, different millimeters in length, focal length. You can't do any of that, but in a DSLR camera you can do that. So under $500, the fact that you can do this, of course your lenses are going to come at a more additional cost, but at the same time, you are getting these lenses that like can make your photography much better. And with I like to say this, with a kit lens and that camera, sure, you can get some cool shots, sure, you can shoot in RAW. That's another good part, is that you can shoot in RAW and edit your photos really well compared to JPEG or PNG images. But if you're just going to be using this body and this lens, the kit lens, you're basically going to be getting shots that you can basically get with an iPhone, and especially with the iPhone 11 coming out and all that. I think that photography on iPhones has become much better. So I do not recommend this camera if you're not going to learn how to shoot properly and that you're not going to upgrade your lenses sometime soon. So let's put it together. So first of all, I want to go over the menu settings and how this camera is, functioned and what's actually on this whole thing. So first of all, let's talk about how it has different menu systems at the top and where everything is located. So in this camera, for sure, one thing that I like is having the trigger button for taking a photo right here at the bottom, at the top. So right here, I like having that right there because it's pretty universal. Everyone does that, I think. And then it's just cool like that. And then you have a flash button here, which I said there is a flash in here. So if you press that flash button, it pops up and then you can take the photo. But anyways, that's that. And then you have a dial here. I believe that if you click on something, you can actually dial this thing around. And then we have our other dial, which is basically for using settings. Here's the thing about this camera, that if you're using this camera basically with the kit lens, I think your best bet might just be to shoot in auto mode, because changing all these things is not easy. So if I go into manual mode, which is technically my favorite in the Sony cameras, if I go into manual exposure mode, I basically can click on the Q button here and I can, select which things I want here, and it kind of explains me on the bottom that what they do. So you have your shutter speed at the first, then you have your aperture, which is also, as I said, fixed. So at this point 5.0 is the lowest, and then you have ISO 6400 being the highest, and then you have some of the flash settings, etc., your white balance, and then you have your RAW, which is the most important part, that you can shoot RAW photos in this camera. And then we have evaluate metering. It's just focusing. You can change this around or whatnot, but I want to keep it simple. It does not have touchscreen at all, so don't try touching this screen. It won't work. You'll have to use these buttons in the front. You'll have to use those to navigate around. You have to use the AF, white balance, ISO, and those buttons, even though they are there. But yeah, you can also use these buttons to change ISO, autofocus, white balance, and stuff. So yeah, it's not bad, but if you start using it, you'll see that there are a couple things that are really annoying. For example, if I put my eye up here, again, I can't really see from here unless I put on the video mode on. I can't really see all the settings that are happening here, and then you get like a whole different way of controlling your settings on the left side. So if I do click the left side, then I can see all the things that are happening, which is like my preferred way coming from a Sony mirrorless camera, because I'm always looking at the screen and then I'm looking at the viewfinder, and I can see both of the same thing basically. Like I can look at the same thing here and there, but DSLRs, since there are mirrors in the camera, you're not having a digital viewfinder. If you don't have the monitor on, you can't really see what the settings are that you're applying. So for example, if I'm out here and I'm, clicking on all of these things, I can't really see what it's doing to the image. So is it becoming dark? Is it too dark? And I can't really see because this isn't digital. It's going to show me the same thing no matter what I change the settings to. So I would have to go into, this red movie button, I call it. You'd have to go into that mode to see, and then you press Q, and then you finally get like the same thing, and you can see how it changes your images. Let's go into the video mode, the actual video mode up here on this dial, and then click on Q. You can change. So you have basically 4 settings for different shooting of video. So you get 1920 by 1080 at 30p. And then you get 1920 by 1080 at 24, which is a 720 at 60p. And then you finally have a 640, which is a really low resolution at 30. So to basically use some sort of slow-mo, you would have to go to 720. You can't even shoot slow-mo at 1080 unless you shoot at 1920 at 30, which is probably where you can do 15% slow motion in this. So it's not really good for slow motion. It's not really that good for video. And just focusing, as you can see, this is the camera trying to focus. So focus is not great. It's good for this camera and you know what you're doing. It's good, but also you have these stabilizer that's built in the camera and the lens, and then you have a autofocus to manual focus. I think when I had this camera, I primarily used it with a 50mm 1.8, the Nifty 50, and I would mainly shoot in manual focus. As you can see here, I have 2 rings. So there's the top ring here, this one right here, and then you have the zoom ring. So I would use the focus ring here to focus in and out and see what's going on. So you can obviously do that, but let's go back into photography and let's go into manual. As I said, this thing is good and bad in its own terms. So let's take a couple photos and see how it goes. So I think the biggest loss in this camera, or this lens I should say, is when you go from 18 to 55, your aperture changes from 3.5 to 5.6. So ultimately you're getting the same depth of field. You're not getting different depth of field. You're not trying to get, obviously if you are at 55 and you're shooting at 3.0, I think that would give you a lot of bokeh in the back. It would give a lot of shallow depth of field, but at the time being, using this lens, you're not getting that. You're getting like a 5.6 at 55mm, which is, to me, I think it's fine at the time being. But if you want to go better and get some more, depth of field, more bokeh-licious backgrounds, you definitely want to pick up that Nifty 50. I think it comes around $80 now if you pick it off Amazon, and it's a really good lens. And then if you want to step up your game, there's multiple lenses. So this camera is a crop sensor. It's not a full frame, so you need to be aware of that. And all the lenses are going to be actually super cheap compared to a full frame camera like a Sony R5, a Canon R5 or a Sony A7. So those are full frame. Those do cost much more, but this is a crop sensor body. So your lenses will be cheaper as far as you need to know as a beginner. But and this Canon Rebel T7 is just good for beginners. So if you are picking this camera up so if your budget is under 500, I definitely recommend this camera because you can learn how to use all those settings. You can become a good photographer. You can still get some good video. If you want to start off a YouTube channel, you're shooting in full HD, I think this is a nifty little camera you can use and step up your game. So this was it for today's video. I'll have some pictures here and there throughout this video, so you can check them out. I'll edit them here and there, so you can also check those out and see if this camera is worth your buck. If you obviously can invest more, I say go invest more into Sony. It is the leading king of photography and videography. So this is it for today's video. If you guys liked it, please make sure to like, share, and subscribe. Also comment down in the section down below. Let me know if you would pick this camera up, or give it to someone else. Would you recommend this to yourself or someone else, or would you add $1,000 and get the A7 series, or even invest like a $1,500 more and actually buy the A7 Mark III. So this was it for today's video. I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace out.